This episode is brought to you by Fox One. Watch all 104 matches of the FIFA World Cup live in 4K for just $19.99 a month with 3 days free. Build your own multi-view, choose up to 3 streams, and follow player spotlights. Stay on top of every moment with live stats, highlights, and instant replays. The FIFA World Cup, streaming live on Fox One. Offers are subject to change. See fox.com for complete terms and conditions.
Good morning, it's Monday, June 15, and this is the Brussels Playbook podcast. The vibe in Brussels today is combative, as Jordan Bardella says he has no intention of moderating his stance towards the EU if he becomes France's next president. Our colleague Marion Solletty actually sat down with the far-right MEP for a pretty wide-ranging interview, and she's going to tell us all about it in a sec. Also on the pod, G7 leaders are gathering in Évian, but can Emmanuel Macron, the host, keep Donald Trump engaged through to the end? And Brussels is kicking shared e-scooters off its streets, and Nick isn't taking it well. Hey, Nick.
Nope, not having it.
I'm Zoya Sheftalovich, and with me today is our Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent and scooter lover, Nick Vinocur. All right, Nick. For our first story, we've got a special guest in the studio, Marion Solletty. She's Politico's Chief Europe Correspondent. Marion, you're usually based in Paris, but you've been here to interview Jordan Bardella, who looks like he might be in the running for the next French president.
Yes, indeed. I mean, we will know that on July 7 when the much-anticipated judicial decision will land on Marine Le Pen's future.
But then if she is out, then he looks like he's going to be the guy who's running.
Oh, yes. I mean, he's officially the Plan B candidate.
Well, listen, we want you to tell us all about it. First up, Nick, I hear you were practice Jordan Bardella the other day when Marion was running her questions.
This is the things I do for Politico. Method acting. And it was grueling, but I got to say it was kind of fun, you know?
Are you going to now have your political aspirations awakened?
It just made me think, it's not that hard.
Well, listen, let's not faff about. Let's get straight to it. Marion, you were asking Bardella about all sorts of things, but one of the things that Nick and I have been talking on this podcast about is the fact that Brussels is sort of wondering whether maybe Jordan Bardella might get the French presidency and then suddenly discover a softer side to him and do a Meloni and become a constructive member around the EU Council table. What did he tell you about that?
Yes, so I think, there is a different perspective on that in Brussels and in France. I think the EU bubble, is sort of trying to reassure itself. Some people are afraid that the national rally governing France will be the end of the EU. And there has been this sort of mood music about but it will just be a Meloni. But he made clear during this interview that he is not giving up on the national rights, very radical agenda when it comes to the EU, and that he's ready for a showdown in Brussels.
So he's going to be less Meloni and more Viktor Orban, sounds like.
Well, we'll see. When you ask his closest advisors, will he be sort of Orban or Meloni, they say, he will be Jordan Bardella. So, he will probably use a mix of both. He signaled that he was very much ready to work with more mainstream politicians on issues such as cutting red tape or, migration even. But on other issues, he's probably going to clash really hard with them. And that includes, for instance, the EU budget.
Well, yeah, I did want to ask you about the budget because that's a huge topic, particularly because we've now got the nego box that's out, as we like to call it here. That's the first kind of figures that give us a sense of how much money is going to be in that long-term budget. And there are some real big fights emerging. It's pretty clear now between the people who want big spending and the people who want less spending. So where's Bardella going to land on that?
Yeah, so brace for an even bigger fight if he does come to power, because he made it very clear that he wanted to reopen these negotiations if he were to be elected. So when I asked him, this negotiation is wrapping up, essentially a lot of people are hoping to wrap it up before the French election.
Yeah, because the French election is April 2027, but everyone's hoping that they're going to get the deal done by the end of this year.
Yeah, and he said it's unacceptable that they're trying to wrap this up before such an important election. And I think the next French government should have a say in the long-term budget. And if I am elected, I will definitely reopen that and lead very hard negotiations on essentially cutting the French contribution to the budget.
I do find that kind of surprising because this was supposed to be a threat to the EU that if the EU does things that France doesn't want, in that case, France will reduce its contribution to the MFF. And he's basically telling you, we're going to reduce it to start with. And of course, that would be a huge problem for the EU.
Absolutely. He's very much willing to play hardball.
You also asked him about Ukraine. And that's an interesting one. We know Marine Le Pen's history with Russia and Putin and the loans that they contracted from a Russian-backed bank to finance their campaigns. What does he say about continued support for Kyiv, which has been France's position?
Yeah. He's been very clear that support for Ukraine essentially should come at the expense of the French. And so what he's trying to do two things here, like first sort of check off his party's pro-Russian image. So he's drawn a bit of a line between him and some other party members who are still, sort of echoing Kremlin talking points. He said out loud, Russia is a threat to France and to Europe. So that's quite clear in the way he speaks. But on the other hand, he made clear that, for instance, the security guarantees that Macron has committed to post-peace Ukraine were up in the air if he were to be elected. So no French troops on the ground, even after a ceasefire or as some sort of, peacekeeping capacity. And his party has obviously voted against all sorts of resolutions supporting Ukraine in the parliament. So
that's the European Parliament or the French Parliament?
The European Parliament.
Because he's an MEP, of course.
Yes.
And let's recall, as far as I understand, they have not found someone to fund their 2027 presidential campaign.
No, they're still
right?
looking.
Yeah.
They're still looking, yes. Mm-hmm. They're looking with French banks and abroad.
Have they been in talks with Trump, with the US?
They wouldn't say, I suspect not, but why not? He had some tough words for Trump in the interview, interestingly. The party has been trying to sort of keep him at a distance because he's a bit toxic to French voters. He used the word erratic, which is quite strong. He's certainly distancing himself from Trump.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Marion. Listeners, if you want to hear more about what Jordan Bardella told Marion, you do need to go to our website today because you can read and watch the whole interview there. Nick, you are about to head to the French Alps, to Évian, where the G summit is about to take off. Where are you flying into? Is there an airport in Évian?
There is none. And funny you ask, because Switzerland and France are not happy about this G7.
Why? Why are they not happy?
Well, because France is hosting it in Évian, but most people are flying into Geneva, which means that the Geneva airport has to pay for all the security. And as you know, G7s, there are protests. There's a lot of activity around it.
Oh, yeah. People get pretty spicy.
Exactly. And so the Swiss are saying, hey, we're running up a bill in the tens of millions of euros for security. Maybe you could contribute to the tab. And France has said, no, they will not pay.
They've said, Switzerland, you've got enough money, thank you, and no thank you.
That seems to be the subtext. But let's talk about, what's on the agenda here.
The substance, my least favorite part of any discussion. Well, okay, let's chat about it. Let's just remind our listeners, it's the leaders of France, Germany, Italy, the UK, the US, Canada, Japan, plus Ursula von der Leyen and Antonio Costa from the EU getting together. And the theme this year is basically global economic imbalances, aka China flooding global markets with cheap stuff.
That is the euphemism of the day. And indeed, everyone wants to talk about these global imbalances because it seems to be the lowest common denominator. These are all sort of Western-friendly countries. And what they hope is to come to some kind of joint position on China. I'm told that even there, expectations are low for something like a joint communique or something.
You've been reporting that there probably isn't going to be one. There might be some presidency notes that the French come up with which summarize what has been discussed. But this is actually not unusual in this day and age of Trump because when Trump is at the table, often a joint communique is too high a bar to reach.
Yeah, it was not too long ago they weren't sure that Trump was actually going to come to this.
Oh, isn't Emmanuel Macron throwing him a big old fancy dinner at Versailles to get him to stay through the whole thing?
That was exactly the idea. So they know Trump likes ballrooms and pomp and circumstance. So they put a dinner at the end to entice him to actually stay through the whole thing. Because as someone put it to me, a senior EU official, we just need to get through this. The idea is we need to get through this G7 without blowups, get to the NATO summit in Ankara with the transatlantic alliance intact, and hopefully by the fall, things will look better in the world.
How do you square that circle, Nick? Well, listen, they're not the only ones who are going to be there because Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, he's going to be jetting in as well on Tuesday, though. Yeah. And I've been talking to some Ukrainian officials in Kyiv and here, and they have a sense that this G7 might actually go better for Zelensky than other meetings with Trump have gone. And that's because Ukraine is on the offensive right now and is doing much better in the war. Is that what you're hearing as well?
That's the narrative out there. I think what they're saying is it's going to be harder for Trump to put pressure on Zelensky because it's easy to pressure a loser. It's harder to pressure someone who looks like a winner. But in terms of deliverables, in terms of what Ukraine needs, which is more air defense, more financing, and a better peace deal, it doesn't look like we're going to get that much concrete out of this G7. One thing in the briefings they're saying in between the lines is we got to come up with a joint approach to Russia. And we know that in Anchorage, Trump basically offered concessions on Ukraine's behalf, and they kind of want him to back away from those concessions. We all get behind a line that there are no territorial concessions to Russia in peace talks. But even that might be elusive here. I think what's really interesting is sort of the handing over of the baton is really what's going on at this G7, where the Europeans are much more in the driver's seat, and we might get some kind of recognition from Trump, other U.S. officials that, yeah, you can take the negotiations forward. It's over to you.
It's actually also pretty important to see how Trump handles European leaders here, whether Macron, Merz, Starmer, whether they're able to get the kind of friendly Trump or if they get the combative, pugilistic Trump that's all about telling Europe where to stick it.
Yeah, I always remind people of that famous picture of Trump looking like a sort of angry toddler surrounded by lecturing European leaders. That was at a G7, and that can easily be the dynamic, Trump versus everyone else. I think the idea is kind of get through this, but the idea of getting wins, the idea of building bridges, of repairing things, I have not heard a whole lot of that in the briefings going up to this.
Yeah, let's actually really quickly talk about the other big meeting that's happening today, also on your turf. It's the Foreign Affairs Council, the FAC, and that is happening in Luxembourg, and it's the EU's foreign ministers. They are going to be discussing one pretty spicy topic, something that has divided the EU, and this is this discussion about sanctioning certain Israeli politicians, particularly the National Security Minister Ben-Gvir, over his treatment of the Gaza flotilla activists. Where are you expecting this one to go?
Yeah, so not too long ago, we had the first unified stance on sanctions against Israel from the Europeans, and that was a big moment. Hungary changed its stance, and we got sanctions against violent settlers in the West Bank. But it's looking like that's a one-off because there's this big push to impose individual sanctions against Ben-Gvir, and it kind of looked like a slam dunk. I mean, the images of the Gaza flotilla activists being kind of manhandled and mistreated, widespread outrage in Europe, several individual travel bans. But from what I'm understanding, it does not look like we're going to get that unanimous backing for these sanctions. We're going back to more familiar configurations, some countries opposing, Germany, Czechia, also talking about Bulgaria and Slovakia.
Yeah, and to be clear, one of the reasons why some of the countries oppose it is also because they feel like it might actually help Ben-Gvir because he can then weaponize that in his campaigning.
Oh, absolutely. Let's not forget there is an election coming up in Israel in the fall. So we could get a very different government, and you're going to have, the far-right factions digging in their heels. It's a very hot-button topic today. But that's not all, because we also have, let's say, more positive news, certainly for Ukraine and Moldova, which is the opening of the first cluster of negotiations for joining the EU.
That's going to be huge. So this is the official opening. It's the first big step that the EU has been able to take in a really long time because of Hungary blocking. Viktor Orban is now out of the way. Peter Magyar has unblocked this move. And so, yeah, as of today, the real negotiations for Ukraine and Moldova to enter the EU begin. Nick, our last thing we're going to talk about, it is something that I think is going to wound you right in the soul. It's the fact that Brussels is going to be banning shared e-scooters from next January. Basically, the license for Bolt and Dot is expiring and they're not going to renew it.
I feel like it's against me. It's a personal affront. It's how I get in when I'm in a hurry. I find them pretty safe, very useful, but not everybody seems to feel that way.
No, that's right. And the government is saying, look, accidents are on the rise. They said 666 people were injured in e-scooter accidents last year.
Very, very dodgy numbers. Give me the total number of accidents on bicycles, and then let's talk. Let's compare and contrast. Just saying, oh, there's 600 accidents. So what? I don't know. That doesn't mean anything.
Well, they're also saying that the scooters have been used in 25 shootings in Brussels in 2025.
And how many cars have been used? Okay. No, I mean, I'm serious. Like the idea that e-scooters are a drug dealer's dream, to me, as a reason to ban them? Come on, guys.
Well, I would love to hear from our audience, actually. Listeners, let us know. Link is in the show notes to our WhatsApp. Send us a note, voice note or whatever. Tell us what you think. Are you pro this ban? Are you anti? Are you a Nick or are you a Zoya?
I know what they're going to say, and you know what? It's fine. I respect all views.
All right, folks, that's it from us today. Please do subscribe and share us with your friends. Share us with your enemies too. Why only should your friends be informed? That's my question. Thank you so much, folks. Speak to you tomorrow.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.